Hello and welcome to the Moan Zone, where today we will be testing out the Archon Studios Grand Stronghold and seeing how well it holds up against a Siamese cat. For those who've been following my Twitch channel or perhaps caught a YouTube live stream, you will know that I spent 3 months working on this, hand painting every single step. This 317 part kit is an absolute behemoth weighing nearly £9 and brags to be a perfect centerpiece for your table. But don't forget, it is fully modular with other kits and can be configured in a number of ways. Today, I'm going to be building it as per the box, following the instructions. Once built, we're going to be doing some simple stress tests with basic prods and pokes and a 3.2 kilogram cat, but more on that later. This behemoth of a box is often sold at £150, but on Wayland Games, it's currently £125. Let's take a closer look at the box. So as you can see here, you do get a lot of tiles, including all the attachments to fit. The binding clips are unique to Dungeons & Lasers, but are universal across the brand and all their range of dungeon tiles, and I believe even their upcoming Caves project, but more on that later. Many of the components of this set have been recycled from the Royal Castle release of their third Kickstarter, and they have amazing quality, which I'm pretty sure they've improved over time. These walls are beautifully cast, wonderfully crisp, and very durable. I am very surprised at how durable the pegs are. As I said, these are some recycled components, but they do feature elements of other kits. But that does mean by buying these boxes, you can upgrade your castle and build bigger and bigger creations to suit your tables. So let's have a look at the individual components. These are our standard wall tiles, including doors and windows. We have the double wall tile, which are all windowed. And I'm particularly proud of these floor tiles. I managed to get this beautiful shade of green. Absolutely in love with it. I'm really surprised myself with that. If you'd like to replicate this paint job, please do check out my 60-second paint guides here on the channel. In addition to the floors and walls, we do have additional options, including these lovely little wooden railings. They come in the half length and the full length as well, as do the battlements, which again follow suit. Next up we have the roof tiles. These are normally sold as separate kits, with Dungeons & Lasers being very dungeon based, so fairly lacking roofs. It was a later addition in their campaign, so it's great to see this included. Up next we have a series of staircases. Now I believe that is the fantasy stone stairs. There may be a slight mix-up, as I do keep all my stairs and clips together in one storage box, as they are useful throughout my Dungeons & Lasers collection. I've been collecting Dungeons & Lasers for some years now, going from the Fantasy Starter set, Torch Chambers, Sewers, and many of the Kickstarters, so I have hoarded some stairs over the years. I can't remember if these wooden stairs go with this kit, but I thought I'd show you anyway since they go with the stairs pack. With this kit being so large and featuring as many dungeon tiles as it does, I do recommend picking up some extra stairs, as it will give you more options building this in your own configurations. However, not seen these sets of stairs outside of this kit, so this is the first time for me. This is my first experience with a multi-levels kit from Dungeons & Lasers, so we're going to have a look at the floor connectors. These are ones that take you from the first to the second and any additional floors, and they come in a variety. Now, I will tell you now, I have cheated with this build to make it a little bit more efficient. When building this the first time round, I noticed there wasn't enough of each clip to make one floor have one consistency of clip. There was 1 or 2 clips short here and there throughout the build, so I have added additional ones from my tavern set. When making my Dungeons & Lasers tables, these are the clips that will work on all of my build kits. Building from the sewer upwards to the Fantasy Starter set, whatever I want, these will be useful, so get as many of these as you can. As we go through this video, I will be answering questions from my community, like this one from Super Dominic. How easy is it to transport and set up, and do you need a separate case? Well, good for you, B&M in the UK does this amazing case. The orange dividers are fully modular, allowing you to fit for double and single size tiles, as well as any clips or accessories. Once I finish painting the kits, I give them a varnish and I pop them in cases like this. With all the Dungeons & Lasers kits being fully compatible, it is worth having your clips, staircases and roofs in a separate box, ready to utilise for all your builds. So we've got another question from Brad, who asks which sets are compatible with the rest of the Archon boxes. Well, truth is, they're pretty much all compatible. Here are a couple of my favourites. We've got the Torch Chamber and the Sewer. I would love to see these in this build. And then don't forget, you do have the prop pack, which will fit pretty much anywhere in your encounters. The only thing to be aware of is half-height walls will not measure up to the rest of the build. For those new to Dungeons & Lasers, let's have a look at how the tiles join together. In all your kits, you're going to get mini clips like this. This one attaches 2 pieces of floor together, leaving room to insert a wall or a track, or any of the bonus features in the cross between. Throughout this build, I will not be using the little pegs that plug the hole, but during my games, I like to quickly be able to access them. Have a look at the durability of this, they hold really strong. Now onto the walls and doors, you will be using these little half clips. These hold the walls at a 90-degree angle really strong, and the improvements over the years have been amazing. These are primarily for the outside walls, as you'll normally use the crosses between the floor tiles for your internal walls, doors and structures. Again, I stress just the true strength of these pegs now. Even with force, they don't move. As we prepare for the build, I do have to offer my first bit of advice and criticism here for the Dungeons & Blazers build. This instruction book is available online digitally. You can scan the front of the box and it will bring it up on your mobile device. However, I do recommend that you print these, as it will be much easier to access without the screen timing out. That said, on the Archon website, these are not downloadable as a PDF, so I had to screenshot each side of the page and then print them as a collaboration. I would love to see Archon add that as an update in future, where you could download PDFs of your builds. So let's get started on the build. The first thing to be aware of is you need to align the tiles exactly as instructed if you are following by the book. The reason for this is the double tiles will only have the crosses in the place between the seams, not in the middle of themselves, so it will become harder to align doors or walls later on. In short, just follow the instructions, unless I give you some hints otherwise. For the rest of the video, I will be speeding this up, but slowing down for anything relevant that you may need to know. While building this, I strongly advise you do keep a craft knife available, maybe some sandpaper, and definitely some long tweezers, or just something for reaching inside. This may sound really obvious, but also sort out all your pieces before you start. Making sure you've got piles of clips and your different floor tiles will help you go a lot quicker during this build. On my very first build attempt, it took me about 2 hours to build, but I'm sure you'll do this a lot quicker as I was monitoring a camera and recording throughout the whole session. During this video, I will be making mistakes building this, but I really wanted to leave them in so you can learn from the mistakes I made. For example here, check you put all the clips in, or else it will start to collapse on one side. Today I'm working on top of a glass top table, so I made sure to put down my neoprene gaming mat. Not only will this protect the table, but it will also prevent my pegs from snapping as I apply a lot of force. I'm very heavy-handed. If I don't answer your questions by the end of this video, please feel free to drop by my Twitch stream and I'll answer any questions you have there, or if you just want to see how more of these tiles are painted. I stream mini painting 5 days a week, as well as many dungeon tiles. It'll be good to see you. While I did complain about these instructions not being very easily downloadable, I do appreciate the fact that they're colour-coded and have a top-down and a kind of side-on view. Really helps me. If you're not familiar with the miniatures from Dungeons & Lasers, on the sprue every model has a letter and an arrow pointing directly to each part. They're so easy to find. Other companies can really learn from Dungeons & Lasers. So after floor number 1, you will fly through setting up the floor for number 2. The only difference is you're going to be using different clips on the outside of the build. I did mention earlier that I cheated, and I did add some components from other builds. On my first attempt at building this and my first recording, I did notice there wasn't enough of these to complete this layer of the build, and it felt really disjointed having one of the horseshoe designs kind of smuggled in the middle. It was also in deconstructing the last build that I noticed that these components here, they sit on top of the castle walls, and they're designed to add 2 walls without a floor in between, unlike the more various T-shaped connectors. The tolerance between the top piece and the wall itself, it's really tight. I really wish they were a little bit further apart. It may be worth running a file down the inside. Or perhaps a second layer of varnish. I'm not sure which is best here. Don't forget, on this layer you could use the wooden connectors as well. So I decided to go with the 2 teeth connectors. These are absolutely wonderful, but this is the part where you need to keep a knife on hand. I noticed on some of my clips that I didn't trim the flash off particularly well. Now sometimes it does benefit you, giving you a tighter lock. Just keep a knife on hand for those 1 or 2 that don't sit right. While the wall themselves take the weight of the upper floors, it's these little pegs on the outside that stop the building from sliding off itself, with players having small clumsy moments or cats demanding attention, as I'll prove to you later. And with all the clips in place, it's time to mount this onto our first floor. Having worked primarily with the WizKids range and the Warlock tiles, I am really impressed at the strength of being able to move one floor on top of another without it collapsing. Going to give this a few slaps to make sure it holds firm.
Bad girl.
So even this being my second time around building this structure, I'm still not sure if it's better to deploy the floor onto the first floor, then put in the walls, or if I need to do it separately. One of the main issues is the pegs on the outside that hold the floor together do keep popping out of place, which makes it very difficult for the walls. So having that structure underneath to provide resistance is really helpful, but on the other hand, the ability to get your hand under it and apply pressure where needed is also very helpful, so do whatever's comfortable for you. Will be certain areas of the project where I do recommend building them separately, but for the majority of it, you can just build on top. Just keep in mind at all times you want to minimize pressure on the pegs underneath each wall tile. Make sure you're not pushing them anything off their 90 degrees kilter or pushing them too hard. If you do find too much resistance, a craft knife is a wonderful thing. You can shave down the plastic to increase the tolerance, or you can remove your varnish and your paint just to make sure they slide in more smoothly. You'll notice I do that a lot in this video. These connectors are by far the most difficult part of the build and the bit you need to pay the most attention to. What I highly recommend you do is focus on one corner to start with and make sure every peg is as close as you can to that peg and follow in sequence. Unlike the T-joints, which are specifically accounted for, these ones just sit on top, so it's at your discretion and at your failure to keep them straight. Another part of the problem with these clips is once they're attached, they are very difficult to remove and may remove paint. So you do want to get this right first try, so doing it in sequence will be the strongest foot to start on. You may notice that in the bottom right hand corner of the build just here, you find that the wall tile does stick out of place just slightly, leaving a small gap. Now I'm going to continue building with this, I do try and correct it later on, but it does lean into the strength of the product. Even though this part is wobbly and slightly out of place, more likely due to the paint on the actual peg. Maybe it's a peg I've not trimmed properly, there's some flash, I don't know. But it still keeps its shape really well at the end of the build. And the fact that even when all these pegs are slightly out of line and some gaps occur, it still stands really strong. Throughout this video, I'm constantly manhandling it, giving it a turn to work on, sometimes lifting it up. It still doesn't really fall apart. If you imagine this on a D&D game when you're not really touching it, it could last forever. You could live on a shelf for months. In many of the Facebook groups, people are gluing this structure together, and I think that is genuinely a wonderful idea. If you're not planning on using it for other configurations, gluing it floor by floor could be a real strength. For me, that's not an option. This set comes with too many potential builds with the huge number of tiles, floors, walls, and the connector clips. You're going to want to rebuild this in a few ways. I can't imagine not building this without using the torture chamber at some point. From box art to building it in practice, my mind is running through with a million different configurations. A giant labyrinth, adding the fantasy starter set into the basement, adding the sewer system into maybe a dragon encounter, or some were-rats at lower levels. Just making this into one big grand hall for maybe a larger encounter. For those up to the challenge of painting this box set twice, you could easily mount a second copy on top of this one for a grander structure. So now we move on to the balconies, and these can be built separately from the rest of the build, and I do encourage it. This section is very easy to remove later on during the build, even when fully assembled. This is super helpful because if any clips from one of the floors fall down, this is the easy way to get in and out to grab the clips from the ground floor without having to rip apart the whole structure. Again, I do remind you it is important to keep a set of tweezers or something for long-range reaching, so if anything does fall within the structure out of reach of these sides, you will still be able to get them. So now it's time to mount them onto the edge of the structure, and it's super easy to do. They just clip onto the side like this. With the wall clip mounted and mounted on top of the step, it does leave it a little bit off balance, so I'm assuming that the steps are meant to go in front of it, but the diagram's not really clear. Looking back at this build, it is well and truly worth putting the doors and the windows at this point here on before mounting to the rest of the structure. It just gives you a little bit more freedom with your hands and apply a little more strength. Playing with it now, I'm almost certain that the steps go in front of the wall peg. Something I want to talk about with this product is how the set is put together. This is multiple sets of the Royal Castle, with some extra add-ons included. When making toy soldiers and terrain, the most expensive part of the project, no doubt, will be the mould making process, the manufacturing, and the designing. With this kit, we use replicate parts of previous kits all assembled into one box, so we as the consumer get it for significantly cheaper. If this was an entirely created new kit, we would be paying a much higher price, significantly higher price. So I'm really grateful that Dungeons & Lasers are doing this trend of repurposing older kit into newer structures that allow us to elevate our games. You've seen this with more examples with the Tavern, with the Sorcerer's Spire. They're old kits that have been mishmashed together to create much grander structures. While I do appreciate that, that does come with its own problems. For example, in this kit, the clips that are used to attach the second, third, and fourth floor, you don't actually get enough of them to complete an entire floor. So if you've got 16 clips needed for a build, you might find you only have 15 of one with the horseshoe design, or 15 with the one with the teeth. So you get this odd brick. Now, I'm not sure if it's me personally being a little petty, but I really want my Grand Stronghold to be mostly made of stone. Now, around the roof, obviously I don't mind the wood. I ended up having to use wooden connectors on stone layers and it felt really disjointed to me. Luckily, and I think Dungeons and Lasers are onto this, there is a solution. Not to sound like more predatory miniature-based companies that dominate the scene, but buy more kits. Dungeons and Lasers aren't meant to be used individually. They're made to be a large structure you can add to throughout a lifetime. You are deciding that your D&D games, your TTRPGs and board games will be improved by larger and larger builds as you go on. So if you've bought one or more of the roof kits, or one or more of any of the other large sets such as the Tavern and the Spire, you will have all the pieces to interchange and build with all of your kits. The modularity is the same. Personally, I'll be exporting all my wooden connectors that aren't used for the roof to the Tavern, and all the stone ones from the Tavern into this kit, which is what I've done for this build. Many of the people watching this video will have their eyes on the new Dungeons and Lasers caves. It's already been confirmed that they are fully compatible with all current lines of Dungeons and Lasers. The future is only looking brighter. In other news as shared by the live streams, you will find out that they are now bringing out painted version of previous kits as well as future kits. Like many other miniature painters, I love having my own painted minis, so traditionally, pre-painted did not appeal to me. However, I make an exception for Dungeons and Lasers. When I buy a model kit, they often go onto the pile of shame, the pile of potential, whatever you want to call it, they normally end up there. And as soon as I've got room in my commission schedule or my personal schedule, or just enough surface space to keep them, I will then start painting them and being able to use them in my games. Well, if I bought the pre-painted ones, I'll be able to open the box, put them with the rest of my kits, keep using them, and then eventually repaint them to match my style. That means I get immediate value from what's coming out. Now, this kit took me 3 months to paint. Imagine if I opened it and was able to use it straight away, and then when I get some downtime, be able to do it my way. That's a kit I'm getting twice the value of. More importantly, immediate satisfaction, which is great for a hobbyist. Now we're about to start on the most difficult floor. The reason this is so difficult is, unlike the previous floors, there's nothing underneath. This is basically going from floor 1 to floor 3, with only the outer edges. Remember, the first floor had internal rooms underneath to help support the structure, so you're not able to put as much pressure on the middle. That said, this is a wonderful opportunity to use some of your additional parts to build into that space. For those who joined the live stream or any of my content before now, this is Willow. She's a 7-year-old Lilac Point Siamese. She's my best friend and my model's worst nightmare, but she will be helping us with this video later on. In fact, I'd like to give her some thanks now because it does prove that this kit is easy enough to build with one hand at many points in the build. Normally during the stream she has a heated cat bed just to the side of me while I paint, but during the day when I'm doing video recording like this, she can't help but be nosy. She's no doubt wondering, why am I working on miniatures without my audience giving her dreamies? No, seriously, she's that spoiled of a cat. So with the addition of a few more cat hairs, this floor is ready to be mounted. This here takes up the top 2 balconies and the roof section. With this bit being a bit smaller, I decided to work it by hand rather than mount it on the top of the stronghold. I'm pleasantly surprised that none of the edge clips have fallen off in the way I thought they would, so maybe building each layer individually could be beneficial. He says as the clips immediately fall out. So it turns out you can actually build this castle as a stimulation activity for small cats. Bit of fun. And here we see the stubbornness of cats. So, you know, maybe they're not all helpful in building these. The taller this structure gets, the more concerned I am with pieces falling inside, because seemingly with these rough corners, certainly this little turret of the tower, there is more bits that just seem to be falling off. And the more you move it, the more risk. What I found with a few of the connector clips is I may have oversanded them, removing them from the sprues and getting rid of the flash. So with enough of them, you'll find one that fits a lot more snugly than the others. Just save your looser ones for ground floor. These little extensions on the side do form a repeated problem. So yeah, I definitely should have changed the clip, but I'll be honest with you, I was just so excited to get the whole thing built as it's already looking fantastic. Since she's been such a wonderful supervisor, we're going to take a moment to make sure she gets the attention she's been seeking. But this does again further stress that you can build this one-handed for the most part. Shy of adding the floors and making sure everything's completely locked in, one-handed is very doable. Please join me taking a moment to look at these beautiful baby blue eyes. Now, this is the point where I'm really glad this is a voiceover video, because these doorways got some very strong swear words out of me. It was this bit here. Every time I push one in, it would push this tile out because there's no support underneath it. I probably spent about 15-20 minutes on the build just correcting these towers. So if I do this build again, this is definitely somewhere where I want more support underneath to allow these bits to be pressed in firmly. Because I can't go through that amount of screaming again. I've got neighbours. I did try whittling down the pegs a bit to try and reduce some of the friction, hopefully maybe reducing some of the pressure on the actual parts, allowing them to stay in. It did help. Now, I did figure out something a little bit late in the day that can help. Below this section, there is a window. If you insert your tweezers in the window, pushing up, you can push against the peg, allowing you to have a bit more leverage and force. As we're doing the top of the battlements, do make sure that you match your slopes. These do slide down at a 45-degree angle at one side, so just make sure you keep them consistent to be more aesthetically pleasing. These outer walls, where the main structure sits, are really strong. I could not be more impressed, but I really wish there was more internal support on these little towers. Now, remember that naughty piece I told you about earlier? It's still not sitting well. Yet that said, it is holding structurally really sound. So I try and jimmy it free to give it a little bit of a scrape down, but I cannot get those top side pegs to be removed. Honestly, I probably should have gone back much earlier and corrected this, but I want you guys to be aware of issues like this. So finally, we're onto the finishing touches, making sure all the top corners are complete, as well as the roof. Now, this is my first time with one of the roof kits, so I'll be very interested to see how strong it actually is. The first thing that comes to mind is how well they seal between the tiles. With these being angular pieces, I expected some small gaps, but no, really well put together. And as you can see, very sturdy too. The strength and stability of this has given me an idea of the modification I'd quite like to make, maybe using my 3D printer and some sheet acrylic. I would love to make a topper for my dungeons that black it out to players. So as they discover rooms, I can remove tiles, giving some of that secrecy DMs like to keep, while building intrigue and mystery for the rest of the players. Maybe Dungeons & Lasers can get in on this, create some adapters that sit on the top that we can just whip around some acrylic and block out our rooms. And for the first time here, I am using the wooden clips, but had I not have added some more, I would have had to have used them earlier. And with those pieces in place, we're ready to move back onto the tower, and this time I hope I don't collapse anything. It's at this point in the build my mind got wandering to things that don't exist in Dungeons & Lasers yet, but I would very much like to see. Now, with this Grand Stronghold, the big flaw in it, just from a visual perspective, is it has very small doors, with no actual doors, it's just archways. I would love to see Dungeons & Lasers come back in the future and release upgrade kits to these bigger boxes. You may have noticed me slipping up during this video saying Castle Stronghold. It's actually advertised as a Grand Stronghold, but mentally I just see it as a castle. So I would love to see a giant drawbridge, a big gate, some arrow slits, maybe portcullis, just some more really castle-based features. So then you not only get an upgrade kit, which is marketable by Dungeons & Lasers, which is the best of both worlds, because if you want sheer mass and good value, you go for this. But if you want a more deluxe kit or a bigger challenge, buy the upgrade. I would throw money out there. And apply this to other kits too. Give me a fully fledged bar and tavern services. Give me a basement full of kegs. The amount of things you could add to these kits that I would jump at to pad out these huge boxes, take my money. I believe this is how we originally got the roofs and the extra additional floors clips. They listened to the fans during the Kickstarter and provided them. So fingers crossed, that will be coming in the future. Going back to this build, you may notice that one or two of these towers are slightly wobbly. I will admit, I gave up with the clip holding that door underneath, and I just let it freestand. It does hold strong enough to be visually pleasing and to look at, but it may be a little bit more prone to accident. Need not worry though, they are only holding 25mm or 28mm models. And with that last piece locked in, we are finished. That, my friends, is the Grand Stronghold from Dungeons & Lasers. but thank you for even getting this far. So what we're going to do now is we're going to ponder over some questions from the community. Starting with Adeline out of line. Is it value for money? Hell yes. Can you move the floors during play? Yes, but I would keep them on a trade to keep them safe. Also, as it's not been mentioned yet, I just want to talk about scale. Obviously, they scale well with the Dungeons and Lasers minis, but I've got a Dwarf and the Tribute Edition of Kathy Wapple, who unfortunately is no longer with us. Anybody buying this model, it does raise funds for the family. So please do check out that great cause. Little fact about our channel, we do use Kathy for scale, a wonderful tool using when scaling terrain and 3D prints. So thank you, Kathy. The Beholderkin here is the Resplendent, based on wonderful art from Red Straw Baby and sculpted by the absolute powerhouse of talent, Dan from Lion's Tower. So if you want to see this model in future, keep your eye out for #Moonsverse. As a final point, I do want to note that as you build this over time, you will wear down the pegs. So all these little gaps, they will disappear after multiple builds. And even with this, it's still really strong. So the kit only gets better the more you use it. Or just be more diligent and scrape the paint off the pegs as you build it the first time. Moving on, this is what you get as additional parts to the kit. You do get a fair number of archways/doors, you get a couple of roof tiles and your battlements, some spare stairs, but I'm not sure if they're mine, and you get a spare floor tile. Now for a bonus treat, we're going to be doing the stress test with Willow. Willow is 3.2 kilos of pure world domination compacted into a tiny Siamese cat. And my favourite suggestion yet comes from RPG Chronicler, who wanted to test out the structural integrity of the Stronghold using small projectiles, so I found this cat toy. As you can see, absolutely nothing wrong with this. This is belting. Also weirdly satisfying. And will summon Willow, who has done a very good job at words today. If you have any more questions, please leave a comment and I'll happily answer them, or jump by the stream and say hi sometime. I'm always happy to help and show off. Before I go, I just want to thank the Patreons. You have made this video entirely possible and you are truly the wonderful people. If you have enjoyed this video, please do subscribe to the channel. I can't wait to bring you more content and hit that 1000 before my birthday.